The release of Temporal Forces brought many new cards into the Pokemon TCG for all formats, such as Standard and Gym Leader Challenge. One of these cards was Salvatore, a supporter card that caused a rule change with significant impact on GLC. Let's talk about why. As a reference, the folks at Cardboard Warriors wrote a detailed post about this rule change. I've added a link in the description. Salvatore is a supporter card with the following text. Search your deck for a card that has no abilities and evolves from one of your Pokemon, and put it onto that Pokemon to evolve it. Then, shuffle your deck. You can use this card on a Pokemon you put down when you were setting up to play, or on a Pokemon that was put into play this turn. If this sounds familiar, that is because it is very similar to Wally, a supporter card last legal for Standard play in 2017. Search your deck for a card that evolves from one of your Pokemon, excluding Pokemon EX, and put it onto that Pokemon. This counts as evolving that Pokemon. Shuffle your deck afterward. You can use this card during your first turn or on a Pokemon that was put into play this turn. The only card text difference between Salvatore and Wally relevant for GLC is that Salvatore cannot search for Pokemon with abilities, making it a strictly worse version of Wally. There is also an item card called Evo Soda. Search your deck for a card that evolves from one of your Pokemon and put it onto that Pokemon. This counts as evolving that Pokemon. Shuffle your deck afterward. You cannot use this card during your first turn or on a Pokemon that was put into play this turn. So why are we talking about Salvatore, Wally, and Evo Soda? GLC and other Pokemon formats share the same set of rules, excluding the ban list. Like formats in many other card games, GLC has a large list of card rulings. One of these relates to Wally and Evo Soda. Here's the question. Can I use Wally or Evo Soda to search my deck for a card that is not in the current tournament format? For example, could I use it on Raichu to search for a Raichu BREAK after it rotates out? The answer? Yes, you can. Even though a card may not be in the tournament format, it still exists and can be searched for even though it is known to fail. This kind of ruling applies in other situations too. A common example is using a stadium like Brooklet Hill. Once during each player's turn, that player may search their deck for a basic water Pokemon or basic fighting Pokemon, put it onto their bench, and shuffle their deck. Even if you are playing a Fire-type GLC deck, you can still use Brooklet Hill to search your deck despite having only Fire-type Pokemon. To summarize, the tournament format was not recognized as public knowledge for all Pokemon TCG formats, including GLC. This leads to an important rule change introduced by Salvatore. Here's the rule change. The question, can I use Salvatore to search my deck for a card that is not legal for play in the current tournament format? For example, in a standard format tournament, could I use Salvatore on a Raichu to search for Raichu BREAK? The answer is no. A card has to be legal for play in the designated tournament format in order to be searched for by Salvatore. This ruling is a change from the past ruling on Wally and Evo Soda and overrides that ruling. Tournament format is now considered public knowledge, just like the contents of you and your opponent's discard piles, lost zones, and cards in play. This ruling cascades to numerous other cards like Brooklet Hill and introduces some interesting scenarios. 1. Some Pokemon cards have two types built into the card. The list of such cards are Water Fairy Azumarill, Dark Metal Bisharp, Lightning Grass Galvantula, Grass Fire Volcarona, and Grass Dark Shiftry. Due to this, cards like Turffield Stadium can still be used by some non-grass type decks. 2. There are some situations where evolution Pokemon can be in play without having evolved, such as the use of Dream Ball. If you only have Water Fairy Azumarill in play without having evolved from Marill, and there are no other Pokemon type cards in zones of public knowledge, you can use Brooklet Hill since the game state cannot discern whether you are playing a Water or Fairy type deck. This applies even if you've played other Fairy type cards previously in the game, so long as they are no longer public knowledge. Similarly, it is possible to have a board state where you have no Pokemon in your discard pile, in the Lost Zone, or on the field, and the only cards on the field are cards like Lily's Pokédoll, Robo Substitute, or fossils like the antique Helix fossil. In these situations, the type of your deck is not public knowledge, and you can use effects of cards for any type even on the same turn. Of course, Pokemon type is just one of many different Pokemon attributes, and the new ruling applies to other attributes as well. Techno Radar is an item card that lets you search for two future Pokemon from the deck. Miraidon is the only legal target for Dragon GLC decks since Miraidon EX is a rulebox Pokemon. Previously, Techno Radar could be played even if Miraidon was in a zone of public knowledge since Miraidon EX exists. That is no longer possible since it is public knowledge that Miraidon EX cannot be in the deck. To drive home the point, a card that searches the deck must have a legal target. You cannot play Salvatore when the only legal target is Quaxwell evolving into Quaquaval because all Quaquaval that don't have an ability are rulebox Pokemon, and the only non-rulebox version has an ability. So how does the rule change affect your games? For most casual games, the most significant change is that you can no longer use your opponent's stadiums like Stormy Mountains and Brooklet Hill to search for cards that cannot be in your deck. You also won't be able to use cards like Evo Soda to search for out-of-format cards. Otherwise, anytime you play a card that searches the deck, make sure that there is a valid target for that card. So was this a good rule change? Using a card to search for targets not legal in the format lets a player look at the deck, reduce their hand size to perform actions like drawing more cards, and shuffle the deck, all of which can be important in specific scenarios. The rule change reduces the amount of actions a player can perform on a turn, which some people might say is a bad thing. In general, though, I believe this to be a good rule change. Memorizing a list of unplayable cards is not beginner-friendly when that list contains break cards from XY, GX cards from Sun and Moon, and new EX cards from Scarlet and Violet, and it adds tournament format to the definition of public knowledge, which I find more intuitive. As always, thanks for watching, and let me know what you think of the Salvatore rule change. Until next time, peace.